All right, looks like we've got all of our panelists over here. We've got some people joining. So I'm going to kick it off because it is 1 p.m. right now. I'm Jennifer Curtin. I'm a physician. I'm the co-founder and chief medical officer of Rhythm. And I'll be the moderator for today's session, which is Can AI Crack Long COVID? We've got an excellent group of panelists here today to discuss. I'll do some introductions, but first I'll do kind of standard disclaimers. So anything stated here is for educational purposes only. Please don't take it as any kind of medical advice or advice in any other ways. And also, we're going to have some audience Q&A at the end. So if you want to submit questions ahead of time, please just submit them using the Q&A button. And we'll try to answer as many as we can. We won't be able to get to all of them, but to go ahead and submit them throughout, and we'll save them for the end. And all right, so I'm going to kick things off by introducing our panelists. So I'm going to start off with Michael Snyder, PhD. He's the director of Stanford Center for Genomics and Personalized Medicine. He is a precision medicine pioneer. He has over 900 papers. He's part of 17 startups, 2 unicorns, and he's done trailblazing work in multi-omics, wearables, and at-home microsampling for early disease detection. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
My pleasure to be here.
All right. And then Philip Alvelda, PhD, CEO of BrainWorks Foundry, former DARPA program manager. He's a serial entrepreneur who led national initiatives in neural interfaces, machine learning, and AI-enabled biosurveillance, who's now championing ethical AI and neuroscience innovation. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you. Great to be here as well.
All right. And Ian Simon, PhD, former director of the HHS Office of Long COVID Research and Practice and OSTP health strategist. He coordinated U.S. pandemic preparedness and long COVID efforts across federal agencies. Thanks so much for joining us, Ian.
Good to be with you.
And we have Tom Rosenblatt. He's the CEO of Being and Stanford MBA. He's also a chronic illness patient advocate who's been leveraging longevity science into consumer products after founding messaging app called BotMe, which had close to 1 million users. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so I'm going to kick things off. And the first question I'm going to start with, which we're just going to go around the horn, get everyone's perspective on how did you get into long COVID or the chronic illness space? And have you ever used AI for your own health or for that of a loved one? And let's see, Tom, I think let's start with you.
Yeah, definitely. And great to be here again. So I used AI to manage my own health. For the last few years, I've been suffering a lot, which probably like many people on this panel. I had daily chronic migraines, I had stomach spasms, trouble sleeping, chronic fatigue, and I had issues with the medical system. My ENT treated my deviated septum without thinking about my gut inflammation. My GI specialist addressed symptoms without connecting them to my migraines. My migraine doctor prescribed migraine medication without exploring the root cause. And in these chronic illness conditions, there's very little urgency from these specialists and there's very little coordination. And I would say that siloed specialist approach actively prevented my diagnosis for years. With that context, I started, like many people today, turning to AI to fill in the gaps. I'm sure I'll talk more about this, but I found AI to be incredibly helpful for helping connect the dots that these specialists in different, departments and different specialties just didn't see.
All right. No, that's an incredibly powerful story, and I can't wait to hear more details about that later. Ian, let's go to you next.
Thanks so much. So I am, as you mentioned, the former director of the Office of Long COVID within the Department Department of Health and Human Services. I began that tenure in January of 2024 and continued until that office was recently closed in April of this year. Prior to that, my touchstones with long COVID really came out of the acute COVID-19 response, where I was working at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy on the active response. And just a few months into that response, we began hearing from many patients, many people about these long-lasting symptoms. A colleague of mine, previously healthy, 32-year-old, got an acute infection and was out of work for months, just months, and it was not like him. So we knew something was really going on, and from that time, I myself had long COVID for a bit after an acute infection. And we have, and when the office was operational, we worked extensively with patients to understand what their needs were, how we could connect research to clinical practice, and then connect that to broader public awareness, so we could educate physicians and educate the public on the trials and tribulations of people with long COVID. The other answer to your question, I have not used AI for my own health. But it is one of those things that it's such a rapidly growing field that the capabilities now are really endless.
All right, thank you. Mike Snyder, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. We do a lot of big data research. And so almost by definition, we use AI for everything, but it's mostly on the basic research side. As far as long COVID, we've come up with, well, this would be MECFS, I guess, more. We've done new AI methods. We're trying to get at the genetic basis of that. And as you know, long COVID and MECFF have a lot in common. And so we've actually, with these new they're deep learning methods, we've come up with 115 genes that actually are involved in MECFS, and many of them overlap with things involved in long COVID. So it's been kind of fruitful. We also have, we're running a project where we're tracking people with wearables and with microsampling and things like that, with omics profiling. And there we're trying to put together personalized packages where we can see what, good days and bad days on people at a personal level. And in that front, we have actually built such a system for me. We've used it on me to see when I go off track from my standard baseline. So we're having a lot of fun with AI.
Okay. All right. And then Philip.
Yeah, my journey with COVID has been a long one. When I had joined the DARPA's Biological Technologies Office back in 2014. And so I was involved in many of their projects to consult and help my colleagues set up for example, the pandemic warning system in China, and to decide on the investment in the two MIT grad students to create Moderna and invest in the development of the synthetic biology-based vaccine platforms that resulted in the mRNA virus, attack measures. And I had actually left DARPA by the time the coronavirus alarms started going off in the fall of 2019, well before China acknowledged anything happening, and got pulled back into seeing what I could do to help in the response. And long story short, I ended up setting up an international working group to assist in collecting data before it could be filtered by governments, doing analysis, sharing it with the various governments, and then working to analyze the efficacy of different abatement measures. And pretty early on, it became clear that the virus was doing immune system damage and could have long-lasting effects. And pretty much as we had predicted, along came long COVID with all of the effects on your various organs and susceptibility to disease and reactivating of latent diseases and all these things that we now see as part of that syndrome. I also ended up using AI to advance molecular diagnostics, so we could do very, very large scale COVID testing at very, very low cost using gene sequencers. And we did many millions of tests for a range of schools, mostly along the West Coast, but nationally. And then I had the incredible, synchrony. I won't call it fortune because it wasn't great for our family to have a child in the house succumb to long COVID all the way up to seizures. And Tom, the thing that you described where you enter a stovepiped, specialty restricted medical system that was not helpful and in fact many times harmful. And we even had a neurologist say, well, I guess she's epileptic now. And ultimately, of course, we were able to use AI and what we had learned in helping all the different nations understand the disease progression and the abatement measure and the treatment courses that had been experimented with to that point, to ultimately diagnose it ourselves and then insist that the medical establishment do the tests that we had determined would be helpful, and then resulting in treatments like iron infusion and dietary restrictions and supplement courses and exercise grading and all of the things you do to address the myriad symptoms that can arise. But AI was central to that analysis process. It was central to the application to the testing algorithms. And we see it used more and more to, in the absence of what I would say is a universally established process of treatment that has, notable effect. It was really useful in kind of sifting through the myriad of different things that people are trying for their different aspects of long COVID and what is having efficacy and what is not. And so this idea of just ingesting massive amounts of data and being able to synthesize it and present summaries is very, very impactful in my mind, especially when there's no established guidance. It gives you ideas to try, things to explore. And of course, with that should go a cautionary tale because there are many things that are proposed that are, not to put a fine point on it, batshit crazy that can do damage to you. So I think, buyer beware. It's a very powerful tool, but it does have limits. And checking and validating is very, very important.
Thank you. And so I think, we've got probably a range of people who are of levels of familiarity and tech savviness and background. And maybe some people have used AI, some people haven't. So Philip, would you mind actually just giving us just kind of a very general, broad overview of like, just what is AI, just kind of defining it for the audience?
Sure, sure. Now, of course, I've been working on AI since the 1980s. And so the answer to that question has changed every decade. And so I will give you the latest version. It's one of these things where we think artificial intelligence is usually something like the latest technology we've been able to build that has some sort of analogy to what the human brain does. And so can we build an artificial thinking machine that thinks in useful ways the way people do? And I think everyone is aware that this last couple years has been a huge wellspring of new AI capability. And so I want to kind of characterize what that change really is about. And the change really is about how we are representing abstract information in the AI models. And the way to think of it is that a human brain, has a bunch of different areas that are involved in computation. And it's kind of the aggregate activity of all those areas of the brain that represents any one thought or abstraction or physical thing that's in front of you. And so when we were at DARPA, we actually invested in the research that helped us understand what the brain was doing, how it would represent information. And now we were able to translate that into this notion of embedding. So you embed an idea in a numerical representation that now you can computerize. And so the AI really, what we've built, and it's important to understand what is in the current generation of AI and what's not. So what is in the current generation that's so powerful is really kind of a digital version of what our outer cortex does to represent an idea. So it's kind of like a memory that can represent all kinds of ideas and not just store the ideas, but store how they're related to one another and how they're expected to have. If you have one idea, what's the next idea that you're likely to have? And so those two fundamental things it's kind of easy to say, but kind of hard to imagine what the implications are. And one of the big implications that people struggle with is just how much information can be stored in these things. And when you think of a memory or a human, like imagine you have a relative that has a notably good memory, okay? That's not even scratching the surface. We're talking about the fact that these large language models, they embed the entirety of everything that's been published on the World Wide Web. Everything. And so that is in there. It's in the memory. All the way those things are related is stored there. All the information about technical papers, research papers, clinical trial results, drug efficacy, everything that has been published is stored in these models. Now, what's not in the models is anything about value judgment, harm or benefit, executive function, making decisions, anticipating the consequences of your actions. All of these things that are part of a human brain that we imagine should be part of an artificial one, but they're not really, we haven't built those pieces yet. What we have are memories and increasingly sophisticated ways to ask the memories questions and get that information out. But the sophistication of those extraction methods today, they're still very, very limited. And so, what we end up with is a tool that stores an immense amount of knowledge, but is not always clear or forthcoming or accurate in the way it comes out. And so how you learn to use these powerful tools really should depend on how important is it that you get an exact answer that you can have absolute confidence in, or is it something that you just want something creative like a new movie idea or what to watch on television where you're not so concerned about the accuracy. But notwithstanding that, for applications like medical and clinical work, diagnostic efforts, people trying to use it to figure out, what is the problem with their disease, it is an aggregate of all of this information that's published. And machines like Grok, they include all of what's been published on Twitter. And so that includes everyone who has long COVID, who's been talking about it and what works and what doesn't, and what clinics did they go to and who helped them and who didn't. All of that is in there. And so the challenge is, how do you ask the right questions in the right framework to get the information you need out of it? And when you get that information, how can you validate it to make sure that it's trustworthy? So those, I think, are the key challenges. And that's kind of a short summary of what these tools are about. But the applications are endless, and we're only beginning to scratch the surface of what's possible in all these applications. And I imagine each of us probably has 3 or 4 different AI use cases that we've bumped up against. Sounds like Michael might have a few dozen. But it is absolutely going to impact how we deliver care. It will empower people to look after their own care in the absence of support where they don't have it. And I think it has the prospect to radically improve how we care for ourselves and each other.
Awesome. No, it's a great overview. And I want to ask, so Tom and Ian, would you guys mind speaking to briefly, and we'll have to kind of keep this one short so we can move to the next section, but security concerns, particularly around health data. So as people start to use this for their own health, what are some of the concerns around if you put your information into let's say GPT or Grok, and it's got, your name, your date of birth, and all your lab results on it? What are just some things to think about there? And I guess Ian, if you want to start there.
Yeah, I can start. So I think you're exactly right. The concerns are sort of you identifying, having your personal identifiable information tied to your health records, going into a system that you maybe are not sure is absolutely secure. So I think that's a legit concern. I think from the perch where we had in our office, we were very much about de-identifying health data, and all the tools that we used at NIH and FDA and other agencies were paramount. Keeping patients' personal identification information separate from their health records was paramount. It was layers upon layers upon layers of regulation that we had to do just internally to talk to a different office within HHS to make sure that there was not even an accidental leak, an accidental re-identification of data. So that's at least a legit concern, and that was something that I think everybody it should be aware of.
Okay.
Yeah, jumping in. There's a few things on this for me. First, if you are using this to manage your health data in each of these platforms, you can go into settings and uncheck the box that gives permission to share your data, or the what you're basically inputting with their training data, like with the corporation basically that's training the models. So I recommend unchecking that box if privacy is a concern. The next thing on this, just to keep in mind, is that these different AIs have different capabilities. Some have more guardrails around them. So, for instance, I don't usually recommend ChatGPT in its current models to manage your health. It has many restrictions. So if you're trying to ask questions, you might just get like bounces back like this is against our protocol, so you should go see a doctor, which is something to consider. But if you're really trying to get health answers and it's 4 months between appointments and you just want something, I highly recommend either using Claude or using Grok instead. They have much less limitations around them. Specifically, how you ask questions are important. Be specific. Ask for honestly, like security might be a concern, but I would highly recommend really like the power of these tools, as Philip alluded to, is that they are trained across specialties, so they really have a depth of knowledge. So I would highly recommend uploading all of your symptoms, whether you think they're related or not related. Uncheck that box so you have the privacy concerns, and then you can ask some specific questions, asking the AI to connect the dots and other things that I'm sure we could get into.
Yeah, and I think one other thing too is some people will just like you can like blank out like your personal information. So if you're going to upload labs, it just may be something you want to consider to just maybe like blot out your name and like any kind of medical record information. And you can use like photo programs to do that or whatnot. Like that just may be one other way of helping. All right, so we're going to jump into the next topic, which is just AI in medicine in general. And so we're going to go around to all the panelists to just discuss what advancements has AI made in other fields of medicine as of today, or in what ways have you used AI in your work? So I'm going to kick this off with Mike Snyder.
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is pervading all aspects of medicine, and certainly the area where it's being possibly most impactful is oncology. It's hard to imagine a lot in certain areas, all the images are getting scanned and read and diagnostic. That doesn't mean doctors don't review those images to make sure they're correct, but for diagnostics, for subtyping cancer, for making recommendations, that's all treatment recommendations. Those are certainly all impactful areas. One of my favorite areas that's emerging, I don't know, I guess some are coming out as tests, is retinal imaging, where you can actually do retinal scans and not only call retinal kinds of conditions and diseases, there's sometimes 17 of them that you can call from a retinal scan, but you can call things like Alzheimer's and cardiovascular disease. These are all in the research phase now, but it's only a matter of time till they become clinical tests. So a simple retinal scan can tell you there's something like 10 conditions that have nothing to do with the eye, diabetes and what have you, that you can actually make scans on. Certainly in the visit itself, the doctor's appointment, it's recorded and summaries prepared by AI programs. So that now has saved doctors lots of time. So hopefully they'll spend more time with their patients than they currently do, because they won't spend all their time writing down their notes. And I just saw, again, maybe more on the research phase, but returning results via AI. There's certainly, again, various companies doing this. Certainly, again, people building these platforms for synthesizing information, making recommendations that doctors review. One area that if you've ever seen Eric Tippel's book on deep medicine, it's about AI in medicine. It's an interesting read. One area that I disagreed with him on, one chapter was that he always thought you need physicians for empathy. But now actually there's some pretty good AI programs that are pretty empathetic and possibly more so than physicians. So I don't think there's a single area of medicine that can't be touched and, be impacted by AI.
All right. And I guess, Philip, do you want to go next?
Yeah, it's one of those things that there's a really interesting progression in how people are using AI. Um, and many of you have probably seen, the latest fear pieces of, how many jobs are going to disappear, as a result of AI. And look, it's happening. It's happening probably most aggressively in software development, where the software tools are, by their very nature, the easiest ones to apply software AI to. And of course, you have an industry that's used to taking new software and integrating it into its practice. So that's happening very, very fast. And you can see the effect there in, job losses of software development. Software development job postings at the junior level are down 70% from peak. So we see big changes happening in that job market. The same thing is going to be happening in fields of medicine, although slower, because there are other aspects of it than just the software integration. But already we see a number of tools that are really changing everything from how research is done and linking it to long COVID, for example. There's a great AI application that recently classified several different subtypes of long COVID that they could separate and distinguish as being different from each other. Some was, lung focused, some was neurological, some was, cardiac and endothelial. Um, and that's starting to give us tools where we can differentiate what the targeted treatments that would be most effective are, in application. Other areas are also in diagnostics, where just broad general diagnostics for internal medicine, the AIs now outperform the doctors. If you just feed in the data, the AIs are better at making the diagnosis. And the thing that really surprised people was they imagined that, well, it'd probably be a good thing to have, experienced doctors supervise the AIs and make sure that the AI isn't making a mistake. And it turns out that the AIs didn't just outperform the doctors. The AIs by themselves outperform the AI-equipped doctors, because the doctors would incorrectly overrule the AI diagnostics that was more likely correct. So we're entering an era where two things are happening. One, it's easier and easier for a patient to go out and get the tests they want without necessarily having extensive clinical review and veto on what you think you need. And number two, if you can get an AI that is a better diagnostician than a physical doctor, why not go get it? And what should limit your access to those things? In the absence of having it be formal, you can use the current AI tools. Tom's experience, with respect to ChatGPT and Claude and Grok mirrors our own. And so I would add another, plus one to Grok and Claude. For us, we found Claude to be it tended to be more accurate and more reliable about established sources, and Grok tended to be more useful in terms of aggregating kind of community and patient information that was most recent and live on Twitter. So those were kind of the important distinctions for us. But really, the march is on the way. AI is going to be in everything. It's in your phone, it's in your car, it's in your doctor's office in multiple instances, and it's really improving how things go. I do think that it's important to make sure that there's some governance on the applications of AI, because many times it can be arrayed against the patient. And I will not name the individual, but we actually had a meeting with a New York venture capitalist that actually challenged me over dinner. Why are you wasting so much effort trying to, fix, biometric measurements and diagnostics? That's hard. You don't even have great data. Now, where you have great data? You have great data in the insurance information. Can you, use AI to reject services to people that can't afford to pay and maybe extract more money from the rich. And that was a short meeting for us because that's not something that we would support. But the point is that there are AIs that are arrayed against you as a patient to extract more money, to deny your claims. Those are already there. You already face those. I would like to see more AI services applied to helping you get your claims and be reimbursed without too much overhead and get the treatment that you need and so on.
All right, so I think we're going to move to the next one for the sake of time here. So some pretty prominent people in the field of AI have claimed that AI might potentially cure all diseases within the next decade. So I'm going to start with Tom. Like, what do you think in terms of, do you feel like that's realistic? Do you feel like that's hype, somewhere in between? Kind of what's your thought on horizons there?
Yeah, I think in the next 3 years, we'll have a really good sense for how much AI is accelerating versus being exponential. My hypothesis, though, is that it will help deal with the latency problem, and that alone will likely cure many diseases. And what I mean by the latency problem is a doctor gives you a medication, they say come back 4 months later and try it, or you're trying to schedule an appointment because you think something's wrong with you and you want to see the best doctor and you're on a waiting list for 6 months. That's a latency problem versus AI feedback, which you can get in around 5 seconds. That alone, I suspect, might really cause a substantial change in treating diseases. And so over the next 10 years, if we have that integrated into our healthcare systems, it becomes a sort of daily practice. And if doctors embrace the way that AI can work alongside them while they focus on care, it might make a substantial dent in the way we treat disease.
Okay. And Ian, do you have any thoughts on kind of the timelines, the realism or the hype around the cure predictions made by some folks?
Yeah, I would say I don't necessarily subscribe to we will live without any health complications in 3 years. I think, though, what we will do, and this is my sincere hope, especially for the field of long COVID and other infection-associated chronic conditions, is that we will start to really put the pieces together for the real complex, hard to see with an initial kind of easy scan or easy exam. We're going to be able to go levels deeper than that quicker, and so it'll just speed up, I think, a lot of the medical research, a lot of the medical care. I don't think we're going to solve everything, but I am really hopeful that the speed by which we are able to diagnose, to treat, is going to get a lot faster, and especially for something like long COVID, where people have been living this for years. That's pretty close to monumental in my book.
Okay, great. And let's see, I think, Mike, do you want to chime in on your thought on the horizons there? And before we jump to the next topic?
Cure is a tall task. Cure all diseases, that would be a little much, I think. Cure is always a tough, how do you know you've really cured? Manage is a very common word, and I think we'll certainly made strides in all those areas. But I'm the same with the other comments there. It's definitely going to speed up diagnostics, treatment recommendations, and it'll be data driven, which will be nice. Obviously, it hasn't come up yet. I don't know if it'll come up later in the discussion, but trying to get enough data in there to be unbiased so we can be representative for capturing all groups is going to be important. I think it is doable. There's a lot of people, and we can pull in the right data if we can get at it. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to move to the next topic here. So now we're getting into, so we went from AI in medicine generally, now we're going to go more into AI in long COVID and infection-associated chronic conditions. And so really this next question is going to be, what promise does AI hold for long COVID and IACCs? Long COVID is one of the fastest growing chronic diseases in modern history. It really exploded very, very rapidly. And we've been waiting for, drugs to be approved for long COVID for 5 years now. There's still no approved biomarker. There's still no approved drugs for this disease. So let's start by talking about how do we think that AI might improve the search for biomarkers or diagnostics for long COVID and related conditions. And I think let's start, Mike, let's actually go right back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think long COVID, as said several times already, it is a complex disease, and it's probably not just one disease, it's a variety of things. And so I think it's perfect for AI to take a crack at it, for subtyping it, for trying to come up with treatments and things. We ourselves, as I say, we're trying to find biomarkers using digital biomarkers, so using smartwatches and I have my rings and my hearing aids are sensors too. I think they can capture a lot of data and a lot of subtleties that are hard otherwise, but I think we can bring in other kinds of data as well. Biochemical data, I mentioned microsampling, little drops of blood where you can measure now literally thousands of markers. And I think that kind of information will be powerful for subtyping long COVID. And we need those markers because we need to understand if we do treat people, are they getting better or not? And that's still a big hole in this and many other areas of medicine. And I think this is where getting good biomarkers and building programs to be able to track people is going to be super important, and it'll accelerate treatments as well. And given that there's so much heterogeneity in long COVID and how people respond to treatments, we really need these sophisticated methods to be able to dissect all this.
Okay. And Ian, do you want to take a go at this one?
Yeah, Michael had a lot of great points. I think the other things I would add are using AI to try and get at some population level patterns. With the acute COVID, NIH had an effort through NCAS, the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, to capture EHR data from a lot of folks with COVID, and then turn that power and turn the AI algorithms on to look for long COVID and to really look for population level patterns. I think is also really critical. When I first got introduced to this in the office, the idea of using AI for helping with repurposing drugs and finding out which repurposed drugs can be really good at treating long COVID. That was an early hope of mine. What's funny is that we've even that effort's kind of run into some of the more traditional sticking points, like how long it just takes to do clinical trials. So the other thing that I think is really good is unleashing AI on the way in which we are structuring, conducting, and executing clinical trials to speed that up, because we can, have all the great drug candidates, but if it still takes years on years to get through their typical clinical trials process, it's going to be too slow.
Okay, and that's actually a really great segue into the applying AI to that search for those treatments. And Philip, I see you have your hand up, so do you want to lead in on that?
Yes, I think that's Ian, you're hitting on the population level issues. I think is really, really important, because one of the challenges that long COVID sufferers face is that I think many of them, perhaps even most of them, are not even aware that they have long COVID. They might have some condition that is new to them, but they don't know what the original cause might have been. So I think that one of the challenges is for patients that are not even coming into treatment or even know to look and or ask that, do I have long COVID, or how do you diagnose my condition? Just having the tools that can look at the extensive biomarkers for a patient and determine that, yes, they have things that COVID might have been the antecedent for, or maybe some other virus. As we now know, more and more of these long-term chronic conditions like Epstein-Barr virus leading to degenerative neural disease and so on. Just to be able to put the pieces together in this stovepipe medical system where the neurologists don't talk to the endocrinologists or the hematologists. And very often people don't even know that they should, be looking at their blood sugar and understand that COVID can actually make you diabetic from nothing. or it can affect how your iron is regulated, or it can affect whether you see or not, or whether you can have a baby or not. So all of these things can have a COVID cause, but having a tool that can pull these out of the health records, both, from the mass health records to figure out all these connections, number one, and number two, when a patient shows up with a weird condition that they don't understand why they have it, that it can then use kind of the reverse of that, knowing the population data, knowing the characteristics of this patient, they can say, this is a case of long COVID of this subtype. So that's coming. It's happening already. It's just very poorly distributed across the US, and the knowledge is not really widely taken up in the general medical practice, where the physicians are, fighting in the trenches of their daily battles of strep throat, pregnancy problems, and whatever. And they really just there hasn't been a mass communication, a clear mass communication of how interconnected all of these conditions are, all with this antecedent of COVID. So I think that's going to be an important area of both, extracting and determining all those varied connections and dependencies, and then giving the individual patients the tool to realize, I'm part of this cohort, and I need this kind of treatment.
Yeah, and awesome. And so, we're seeing, okay, identifying people who may not know that they have long COVID so that it can kind of present that not only to them, but also to their clinicians who are treating them,
Yes.
identifying these different subclusters to kind of understand, okay, what paths can we go down? How can we possibly potentially diagnose across the heterogeneous condition? And then, I think the finding biomarkers that might be able to, like on the kind of point to specific pathways that may be off.
And I want to be clear, though, we have several trials of these new AI systems that are making those distinctions and discoveries, and they have sets of biomarkers that can now distinguish, 4 or 5 different subtypes of long COVID, and even differentiate MECFS as a related but separate and different thing, quite reliably with over 96, 97% accuracy. So the tools are there, they are coming. It's just, it's like William Gibson said, the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed.
Okay, that's a great quote. All right. So then also moving towards, so this is kind of the identification diagnosis. Now we're moving over towards identifying like treatments and things of that nature. So Tom, what would your thoughts be about how AI might be applied to identify responders to specific types of treatments faster in this population of patients?
Well, one way we can think about this is credit card transactions, where if you're swiping your credit card, sometimes it won't go through and it's flagged as fraud. Um, that sort of same AI machine learning on the back end can also be applied, or is starting to be applied in a mainstream way to patients. And you can do it yourself if you're suffering from long COVID and you want to start using AI to think about managing your conditions. Basically, the shift is having preventative protocols replace reactive treatment. Where right now, if you, let's say something's, you might be sick, you might be getting increasingly sick over 5 years. Maybe this long COVID was the trigger catalyst for that initially. Right now, you won't be able to see a specialist likely until your blood result, for instance, like is out of range. But rather than thinking about it as being out of range, is it actually tracking over time towards an extreme, something that isn't typically looked at these days, as opposed to just being out of a certain upper or lower limit. So if you're managing your health, you can start to be implement a preventative protocol and start to treat your subtype, whatever it is, or however it is showing up, by uploading some of these results into AI. And they can do some of the heavy analysis for you that the medical establishment, which treats disease, it doesn't necessarily treat health leading towards disease, currently implement.
Okay. And maybe I think I'll let kind of whoever wants to take this one. What do we think about will AI help us discover more off-label drugs that might be able to be used for these conditions? And then also, will it help us in discovering new drugs?
I hope so. I mean, it should. Because again, it should be able to make connections that aren't obvious to humans. And because it can reach so broadly, it should be able to bring in, data types that you may not think have observations that are connected, but they really are, and suggest new forms. Fatigue comes, just one example, fatigue comes out in many different ways and many different forms. And you could easily envision that there'd be new concepts that would get drawn together and that there'd be treatments where some certain treatments worked in certain conditions that we didn't expect that should now work. So I would hope so. And of course, these days, I think AI for drug development is being used a lot around particular proteins and targets. And I think that certainly for designing new drugs, I think that has a lot of promise. So if there's ever an opportunity for AI to make impact, it sure seems like long COVID is a sweet spot for it because it is so complex.
Yeah. And Philip, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think when we spoke on a conference last month, Jennifer, we discussed one of those companies that had come to us for funding, where they were developing an AI tool that really was just an AI tool to analyze protein folding and molecular binding. And the wonderful thing about these AI tools that sometimes is hard to wrap your head around is that when you say, well, I want to test something, when it tests something, it does it in a fraction of a second. So it can test a gajillion things over the course of a day. And so, they actually just went through this exhaustive search for every molecule that they could think of to see what would bind to, different parts of the COVID protein in such a way, the coronavirus protein in such a way that it would disable its function and of the virus. And they found this tiny little molecule. I'm not going to talk about what it is, but they found this tiny little molecule that's in a common food. And then if you just concentrate it and distill it and eat it and don't heat it up too much, and there's a few other things that you can do to amplify its effect. It is an incredible viricide. It kills the virus. And it's a natural food substance that you can just go and buy at Whole Foods. And so, they're still testing it, and it hasn't gone through trials yet. And so I don't want to disclose too much about that. But I've now had, since then, two other companies come to me with similar strategies of using molecular dynamics, simulation, and search, AI assisted, to find what binds to and kills different pathogens. And so that's happening too. And so this is the sort of thing like, eat more carrots, and don't heat them up over 100 degrees, and you can kind of stave off different kinds of disease. But those are the kinds of things that are coming out of the tools that are, completely left field, but could be very impactful.
All right. Tom, you have your hand up?
Yeah, we also do this firsthand at Being, which is my company that's has a longevity supplement where our process is as part of our process, that is, we upload tens of thousands of pages of random controlled trials and mechanistic studies and meta-analyses to different AIs. And we see what they suggest, and we cross-reference that protocol with our scientific understanding and read these papers ourselves. But I would say the AI is a critical part of the process, and I suspect as it gets better, that might increase.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, this is a great segue into the next and our final topic is, what can AI do for long COVID and IACC patients today? Like, what tools or applications exist or are in the pipeline? And are there any that you have tried or that you're really excited about? And I think, let's see, I'm actually going to start with Ian.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the tools that I'm really excited about is, I think there's more than one group working on this, but it's one where they put together analysis of all the genomics, proteomics, metabolomics, as well as epigenetic data. run it through an LLM and try to get at some of the additional targets that for long COVID. So really, an LLM that kind of does all of that is, I think, really promising.
All right, and then let's go to you, Tom.
Little mute problem there. Yeah, I guess speaking kind of specifically about what you can do today if you have long COVID and you have AI, like what are some of the best practices here? I've talked a little bit about this already, like maybe use Grok, maybe use Claude, upload all of your symptoms. Then there's some specific questions I would recommend asking. Sorry, backing up one more step, I would upload a paragraph of, how you're feeling, basically your medical history, all of that into the AI. At that point, I would ask some specific questions and I would provide context. So the way these AIs work is there's input boxes or what's called prompts, and you type in a message. So provide some guardrails where you want it to reference clinical studies, you want it to reference random controlled trials, you want it to think deeply. Those are some of the ways to make sure, or cited sources. That's another one. So then you can see what it gives back to you. As part of that, if it's confusing to understand, because they might be referencing molecules or pathways in the body that are a little confusing, you can ask it to explain this. And one of the big opportunities here is rather than being a passive participant in your own health, it can allow you to be an active one, someone who's really managing your health on a day-to-day basis, and not just depending on experts, but getting intellectually involved. And I can say from my own experience, I'm 80 or 90% better than where I was last year. I'm significantly improved. I'm functioning at a high level, and that happened as a result of me taking control of my own health. Because I mean, the thing that you'll hear again and again, so I'll say it if you haven't heard it before, is when talking to doctors, you really need to be your own advocate. They see thousands of patients. So if you can come in with a little bit of theory about what's happening, a little bit of background knowledge, maybe a hypothesis of something you want to explore, that can make a big difference in how healthy you might end up getting.
Oh, it's really great insights. And Mike, do you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, well, I'm biased, and full disclosure, I'm a co-founder of Rhythm, and I know what they're doing. They have a rhythm intelligence platform that actually collects your data, basically makes recommendations about other tests you can do, and works with you to help you diagnose this. And so it interfaces then with suggestions for treatment. So, I mean, I think at some level this is already here, and so glad to hear you had a very successful outcome with this kind of thing, Tom, with however you did yours. So I just think, again, a complex condition like long COVID does need these kinds of sophisticated technologies to be able to take it, because everybody's different in the way they, they get the condition, how they treat it, how they diagnose it, how they treat it. And yeah, there's no one magic bullet. That's the thing for long COVID.
And just jumping on that, I'll say I haven't personally used the Rhythm platform, but I did review many of the treatments that they were offering, and along my process of dealing with brain fog and fluctuating blood sugar, I used many of those kind of LDN, metformin, many of these things that regular doctors won't necessarily give you, but can be extremely helpful, and I know that Rhythm offers this.
Yeah. And I guess so going on to what are some areas, so you guys, we've talked about what tools are out there. What are some areas where you would love to see tools explored or created in this space? And
I'll jump on a few. I think the diagnostic side, again, can still be improved. I saw in the question, somebody put something about brain fog and things. We should be able to quantify that with, various assays. And I think these very symptoms do need to get more quantitative. I think it will help in the diagnostics and the treatments if we can do that. So, and there's just a myriad of different conditions that we just don't quantify properly. And I'd like to see that taken on. Brain fog being one, almost any condition you can think of in the medical space. It's kind of Byzantine the way we actually did do our diagnostics.
And I'm just looking at the Q&A, so we're going to head into audience Q&A now, but just a couple questions in here. So yes, the webinar was recorded and it'll be posted afterwards. So if you signed up, you'll get a link via email to the recording and it'll go up on the Rhythm YouTube channel. So don't worry if you had to drop off or you needed to take a break and rest. And also, so I think a couple people did talk about, is there a way an individual can submit all of their tests to be analyzed by AI? And I think, Tom, you talked about some of the ways to potentially do that, although it is a little bit painstaking, I think, to upload all of your items. In Rhythm Intelligence, we do have a way that you can connect your records electronically so it can pull from a system. But that system still is not entirely complete. So there may be gaps and you'd have to upload the ones that are missing. And let's see, definitely some big thank yous from folks in the audience. And I think, let's see here, just looking through. I guess this one's a good one for just for someone who's maybe, what are the biggest barriers right now to using AI to discover a biomarker for long COVID, and what would it take to overcome them? Yeah, Mike, do you want to take a shot at that one? And
I think we just need more data. So I think large studies on long COVID with deep data dives, I just don't think there are that many out there, quite frankly, using modern technologies. I think we can ramp this up a lot more.
Okay, yeah. And let's see here, reading through a couple more questions.
By the way, I might add it, we want to capture all groups. It should be very.
There's one that sorry, Michael. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just saying, I want to make sure we get representative data too.
Yeah. There's one that I wanted to respond to where someone had asked about what were the specific steps that I took to diagnose what was happening with our child in the absence of help from the stovepipe medical system. And the key realization was that many types of long COVID are based on your brainstem being inflamed and losing the ability to regulate what you kind of take for granted in your body. And so that can lead to a lot of weird things like POTS, for example, where your heart rate shoots up when you stand up or stay sitting up too long, or glucose regulation, where, when you're calorie deprived, you start to have brain fog, or iron regulation, where you have a very low hemoglobin count and you're borderline hypoxic because your brainstem is sequestering the iron out of your bloodstream. So, those were the tools that we really used the tools that we used to really diagnose that were an Apple Watch, and just look at what happens when they lie down, stand up, sit down, stay standing for a while, and just watch the heart rate while that's happening. We even went to an emergency room, and they tested her heart rate when she was lying down, but didn't do anything when she stood up, and she almost passed out, and they weren't diagnosing it. We had to, go out and get an Apple Watch and put that on her. And the first night she had the Apple Watch, we saw her get up, in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. Heart rate went from 60 all the way up to 150, just standing up. And then she's like, "Oh, I feel a little lightheaded." Well, no wonder. And so, so the Apple Watch for POTS detection. The other thing was to get a continuous glucose monitor, where we discovered reactive hypoglycemia, which meant that when she had a big bolus of carbohydrates, her blood sugar would go up, not a problem, but then it would crash, and then there's no regulation on the downside. And when she would crash, her eyes would roll back in her head and she'd have a seizure. And so it was clearly metabolically derived. And so moving to a ketogenic diet, moving to strict regulation of fiber, protein, and carbs straighten that out. She was also, it turns out, borderline hypoxic. We had to get a full iron workup. And that led to the idea that with an iron transfusion, because supplements, would have taken months to correct, and this was an acute issue where she couldn't even go to school. So an iron transfusion, and within 2 weeks there was vast improvement. But I will tell you that for those of you that are suffering from those types of things, the brain fog, the vision effects, the post-exertional malaise, the POTS, these are all things that you can address and over time improve with discipline. We were able to go from seizures, can't drive, can't go to school, to a successful freshman year at UCS, or not freshman, junior year at UCSD in about 5 months.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so happy that she's made that kind of progress. It's amazing. And another question that came in that's a really good one is, are there easy ways to strip personal data from medical records? This is coming from someone who has severe CFS and trouble with cognitive issues. Does anyone have any thoughts on like easy ways to de-identify your data so that you could feed it into an AI?
There must be, but I don't know. Ours is still done fairly manually by stripping out fields, but I'm sure there are algorithms for doing it.
It's really good at stripping out field is AI.
Yeah, but then it has to.
You could use an AI tool to strip out your personal information and then submit it to another AI.
It looks like there's one comment too. Someone suggests copying and pasting the data from the PDF. That actually, I've done that before, because some of these AIs won't allow PDF uploads. So if you just control A to select all, control C to copy, and then you can just paste it and then edit the text. And someone else is suggesting that Adobe Acrobat can also redact the data. Well, one other thing I just wanted to mention, as we've talked about the promise of AI, is that it might tell you things that are incorrect, and I think we chatted about that in the beginning. But just to kind of draw a line underneath that, it might suggest things that are kind of crazy. It might suggest things that, like, for you to get lab results that really you just don't, or lab tests you really don't need to get. So just like keep that in mind, that these tools are still developing.
And this ties into a question from the audience that's how do you like validate or fact check the information that the AI is using? Is there any like specific platform, an app, or other like modality that you use to do that fact checking?
I mean, one effect of me using the AI is I became pretty good at reading medical literature, and I think that is a skill you can develop over time if you really want to start taking control over your health. And another thing I've done is if it said something, I then ran that by my doctor. I then messaged them in kind of the healthcare app, and I said, hey, what do you think of this? One thing to keep in mind, just with these doctors is, I call it the sort of advocacy sweet spot, where the knowledge advocacy sweet spot, where you don't want to be too knowledgeable, or it doesn't necessarily, you need to give these doctors, you need to give them some space, basically. So I would suggest things, but also give them a lot of space, and usually start talking about your symptoms, and then maybe say, what do you think about this, or something like that. Just, be delicate in your framing.
Yeah. And, one thing also is kind of like searching across, like, you can stick it into like standard Google search and start to look at multiple listings. And if you are finding multiple like reputable sources that are saying the same thing. So for instance, if something comes up from like Mayo Clinic or like Healthline or Yale or,
Johns Hopkins, all of those, yeah.
You can look at that and see, okay, are they saying the same thing? Because I know fact checking across AI can be very exhausting, especially if you have limited energy and you have brain fog. Like that can be really tough to like have to check everything. So sometimes you can do a little bit of just a cursory check by just plugging it into Google search or whatever search you use and just kind of looking at the summaries. And if you're noticing that major kind of vetted outlets are echoing that, then at least it gives you maybe a little bit more confidence that perhaps that's accurate. That's just kind of the quick and dirty, so to speak. And let's see, another question. AI has obviously been a massive boon in terms of data processing, but can we do better at deploying technologies to accelerate our ability to build better, more granular biosimulation techniques? I.e., let's see, oh, it's a little bit of a typo there. Is in silico biosimulation a bottleneck? Like, is the robustness of in silico biosimulation a bottleneck? And I think that's kind of getting to the protein modeling and trying to model out laboratory experiments.
Well, you can make simulations around medical records and things too. I honestly don't know how much it's been used for long COVID and such. There are times when it's good to have these synthetic data sets and then set up simulations, especially on the research side. We do simulations a lot to get a sense of what's possible and how good the tools are we're building. So on that side, I'm not as sure about on the treatment side. I'm not an MD, so it's not as obvious to me.
All right, let's see. And I think
It was a good question. You stumped the panel.
yeah, no, it was a very, very good question. I'm just looking to see if we've got any other questions that have come up that are we are getting to, but we are also getting somewhat close to time here. Mike, I just did want to check with you. Did you have something to jump to right now? Because we are past 2 p.m.
Well, I do, but I didn't want to be impolite. So if we're wrapping up soon, I'll hang in there and I'm a little late for my next one, but that's okay. There's a ton of good questions in the Q&A, and
Yeah.
can't go through them all, that's for sure. Ian should take one on.
Yeah, if there's any.
Quiet for a bit. Not to put you on the spot, Ian.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. No, I'll get deep into the tech talk here.
Find one that you like. There's a ton in here.
So someone earlier had mentioned David Feigenbaum from University of Pennsylvania and his company called EveryCure. It's a nonprofit company that sought out to apply AI tools to everything we know about every drug that's on the market, and then constellation of symptoms. For most of his work, it's agnostic to the disease, but he and the company did take a special crack at long COVID, and they came up with a number of drugs, off-label drugs that could be used. Actually, a lot of them were already in the course of either being tried or about to be tried. So low dose naltrexone, metformin were some of the highest scoring ones. But what he did is after he ran the models on them, then he checked and validated with long COVID physicians. So we were talking about like how do you validate what you get out of AI? So even the folks on the front lines of this are taking the results of their model output and checking with long COVID physicians to make sure that they're on the right track and they're not actually then going to be backing anything that might be harmful.
Oh, that's great. That's really interesting. And that company has been doing some really incredible things across like finding essentially pre-approved drugs that can be trialed for other conditions. And I think there's so much promise there because there are so many things approved and we just don't know, like, could they be repurposed into a different condition that they're just waiting to be used for? So yeah, no, that's a great one to bring up. Excellent question from the audience. And let's see here. And let's see. Sorry, my chat's acting up a little bit here, so it's a little hard for me to see. Okay, and then I guess any last thoughts on just like wrapping up? We've talked about just any other areas that you think are exciting on the horizon, any tools that we maybe didn't mention before that you're excited about? And we'll just kind of wrap things up on that note for the panel.
Well, our side, I'm excited about all these areas.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really blue sky out there right now. I think there's so much you can do with AI. And I know a lot of you were, some questions were sort of, how do I learn more about AI and that sort of thing? And I'd recommend everybody get some just general knowledge of what AI is all about. I think it will help you understand it. I think probably even use it. So I would encourage all the listeners out there, and there's a lot of like online seminars about what is AI and things. So a lot of people are scared by, oh, I hate programming, da, da, da. And it's nothing like that. I think you can pick this up pretty quickly. So I would encourage folks who want to learn more to, yeah, start looking online to see what's out there. There's short versions, there's several day workshops, there's all kinds of things. Find one that matches your level of interest and the time commitment you have.
Yeah, and I would add to that to say, it's worth practicing with it. And really the key skill is learning how to ask it questions to get what you want. Because the information's in there. But how you ask is very important. So for example, if you ask, should I get a vaccination for COVID in September? It might suggest what is the average response of the whole population. But if you ask the question in a different way, what would the top scientists and medical advocates who are most experienced with COVID and the disease suggest I do about vaccination? And compare that with what politicians suggest. You would get a very interesting answer that's much more informative, and then you can decide who to believe.
I think also just on the topic of like training courses, there's a lot of free courses out there that are pretty good. So deeplearning.ai has some free courses. They're little bite-sized lessons, and they've got some for just complete beginners. So if you don't code, you're not familiar at all, there's one called, I think it's called AI for Everyone. That's really good. Also, Free Coding Camp has several, and they're just like on YouTube. So there's a lot of really good little classes and courses, and some of them are bite-sized and they're designed for complete beginners. So if you have no experience, like they're still very approachable and friendly. And they're also fairly brain frog friendly too, because they're little bite-sized lessons. They kind of go through one thing at a time. You can replay them, and they have you go through like active, there's like a little built-in session where you can use the AI within the platform. So it's kind of like very, very guided, and it just kind of gets you comfortable, and then you can start playing with it. And I agree. The other method is just start asking it the questions, just type it in, see what you find, explore. Yeah, it's like play 20 questions with it. Ask the same thing multiple different ways and see how it differs in the answers that it gives you. Like add more detail, add more context, things like that, and see if it changes. You can also, an interesting one, because it's generative AI for these LLMs, you can ask the same question and just resubmit the same question and see if it actually changes its answer a little bit, even for the same exact question. Like that kind of gives you a little insight into how LLMs they're not like exact in terms of what they give to you. There's a little bit of creativity that goes into what's presented each time. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, well, one other thing as you're diving into this to keep in mind is what model you use matters, where the newer models, the models are smarter, basically. So if you're using a 4.0 model, you might get a more informed response than if you're using a 3.0 model. So that might mean that if you really want to take this seriously, you might want to pay up. It's around $20 a month for a AI subscription, and yeah, to start getting feedback.
All right. No, that's a very, very excellent point. Yes, definitely the models make a big difference, and some are better at certain things. Some are quote unquote reasoning models, some of them are not. Some have access to search the web, some less so. So yeah, usually going with the more recent ones is a bit better.
Yeah,
Very
and I would add that realize that these AI tools are not like the web tools of before. We kind of have it built into us that the way you would use an AI is you'd ask it a question and you get an answer, and is it good or not? these are more powerful. You can actually stop and have an extended conversation. If what you're getting back is not giving you the details what you want, ask it for something else. Add another piece of detail. Give it a reference to a website. Have a conversation with it. It's much more powerful than the old tools. And as you develop the skills of how to exploit it, you'll get more and more out of it. Talk to it.
Yes. All right. Well, I think that let's wrap up on that note. I think that's a good one. Thank you guys so much from the panel for joining and sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom with the audience. Audience members, thank you so much for coming and spending your time. We'll be sending out a link to the recording and posting it on our YouTube channel. So feel free to come back and watch any parts that you may have missed or want to go review. And feel free to share it as well with your networks. And thank you so much again. And everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll